So that story that you just seen, like you said, Ross, it has created a lot of talk out there in the community. I think a lot of people were wondering what happened, how did we get to this point where the land became an issue with the new survival school site. A lot of people thought that the old survival school site was going to be used for Dewa Doni Zakta's shipping project proposal, if you will, because right now it's only in the pre-feasibility study phase. I think if you're a community member and you hear all of this at once, there's going to be a lot of talk in the community regarding what's going on. How come we didn't know about this stuff?
You know what? One of the things that when I first started seeing the story surface, I noticed that the name of the group that was involved with the old survival school grounds, that came up on a talk show way back in, I think, I believe it was the beginning of the summer.
Right.
And John D. Delorme was on, and he was talking about a group that some of the ladies in town were involved in. I believe his mother and sisters were involved in it. And it involved that piece of land and about protecting it or keeping it as, or improvement. It said something improving the landscape or what have you. But to me, wasn't it preliminary to what would be the opposition eventually?
Yeah, well, there was a group that was created to help to figure out what to do with the old survival school property. Now, I think it's important to note that, as was just mentioned in the story, that the old survival school site is actually will remain untouched. The project that Dewa Doni Zakta is proposing has nothing to do with the old site. What they want is land at the back of the old site. And it's about 18 acres that they're asking for in exchange for KSS taking so many acres at the front, which was once designated for commercial use.
And KSS wanted that land in the front.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so because they had to have access to the school, and then part of their soccer fields, baseball fields, what have you, are all, and berms are all sitting on land that was designated for commercial use. So what Dewa Doni Zakta is saying is, well, okay, you took that, so we can't develop it. So what we're asking is, for this project, we want an additional 18 acres. Well, they actually want more, because they're looking at an acre and 0.375, something like that, to 1 acre, because of the value of property is worth more in the front than it is in the back. So that was one issue. The other issue is, people thought that the old KSS site would be used as part of this portal for shipping in specialty grains, which would be specialty crops such as peas, corn, things that are shipped from out west. So there's really two issues: land, and then a project that nobody had heard about up until now.
Right. One other thing that I'm thinking, look, in the community where it has to do with Dewa Doni Zakta and lands that are deemed for commercial use, they have been given the mandate and they've been given the authority to determine how those lands are used. I'm not so sure about land that's been designated to the education center and how that relates to community input, because you do have the Combined Schools Committee, which is a community members group.
Right.
Represents parents in the community. So in that respect, when you start talking about exchanges and how somebody would say, oh, well, this land is worth more because it's commercial land, it's more valuable. For that kind of thing to be going on in the community, amongst community stakeholders, if we'll use it that way, that to me is it's a bit of a problem. You know, we're talking basically about land. Obviously, whether they touch the original grounds or not, Dewa Doni Zakta is asking for X amount more than they're giving out in the front to do a commercial venture along the water.
Yes.
So I don't really. So the question, I guess, what I'm bringing up is, at what point though does that become an issue for the broader community to have input into before decisions like that are made?
It's true, and I mean, I guess another individual in the community had stated that Dewa Doni Zakta does have access to, or to land all the way from survival school all the way to the tunnel, and that there was this big plan in place to develop these lands commercially. So why would you take more land, for the project when you already have all this land? So that was another side to things. And, people have the right to question things in the community, but I think what was a problem was that everyone's just hearing about this now. And
somewhat
about,
after the fact.
Yeah, so really it's not a combined school committee. It's not their issue in terms of land. Like, there was already lands designated for the education system to access. Now, if we want to have appropriate access to the schools and whatnot, at that point, if they said, okay, well, we'll give you an acre for acre, and now because there was a study that was done, they never went back on their word. They never said, no, we won't do it. It's just that David Onizekta turned around and said, well, there's a land value difference, so therefore we should get more than the original agreement. Mm-hmm. So now the whole issue sits with David Onizekta and the Mohawk Council, because there was a meeting that was scheduled at Mohawk Council nearly 2 weeks ago when all this issue started to surface, and the combined school committee never was aware that there was a meeting going on regarding this whole issue. The meeting was between David Onizekta and Mohawk Council. They were never aware. But ultimately the meeting got canceled. So, and then all of this kind of exploded in the community.
Yeah, no, but I have to say that.
So that's where we are.
My opinion is that it's inappropriate, really, to say, oh, well, this land is worth more, so we're going to take more, go back on into the negotiations from that angle. I just think it's wrong.
Yeah, and you know what? It's really interesting that you say that, because there's other community members who share your opinion, and if you look to the story that just aired, Tawny Miller, who is the chairperson, or she's on the combined school committee, she said the same thing, that there's no value. There should, every property in the community is the same, especially, and there's no price on educational purposes for the future of our children.
Right.
So, and furthermore, if I could, David Onizekta is a body instituted to look after economic development on behalf of the community of Kahnawake, which is, in essence, they still belong to the community. So it becomes a little schizo for an organization. All of a sudden, they're not Kahnawake? They're a corporate body? People, I think, are right to be concerned about those things and raise the questions. But it's just too bad. You end up having the debates or the discussions after it's a fait accompli.
I think that their organization needs to be a little bit more transparent in their actions and in properly informing the community when it comes to things that they're doing. But they'll say that, well, we need to do our own research first in order to inform the community properly. So, that is true too. You can't come out with a project and say, oh, this is our idea, what do you guys think, without really giving appropriate information for people to make decisions.
Still, they did that for the windmills.
But historically speaking, you want, before you sink all this capital into doing research, into a whatever you want to do, you really need to gauge the community feeling about the whole thing.
Yeah, if you look at, the fact is that there is a portfolio chief attached to David Onizekta. I don't know if it's still John D. Regardless of who it is, the fact is that portfolio chief had been on in the summer talking about the windmill thing or whatever. But again, when it was kind of a fait accompli. The Mohawk Council is not, I don't believe, to be excused or relieved of responsibility in informing the community about this, that this is happening. And they did not. Otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it, and this story would have been just aired.
Right. And I think it's also come to out in the open at this point is that there was complaints amongst community members that the Chamber of Commerce in Chateauguay and in the Roussillon areas know more about what's going on in Kahnawake in terms of economic development than our own community does, and I think that rubs people the wrong way, that they'll go to a meeting in Chateauguay and find out upcoming projects in Kahnawake. And this came from, you know, some of the women at the Longhouse that said, we knew about this because one of our representatives was at that meeting.
The one thing I guess, you know, you could say, and I'm not going to make excuses for Dewatuni Zakta, but, you know, I mean, there is a sort of history that the community reacts. There was, what was the ADM project? Mm-hmm. And so you know, Bud Morris has been sort of has talked about those things in the past. Mm-hmm. People want a perfect widget factory, or they, you know, and so like the Mohawk Council, they have this sort of history of saying when it goes to the community really gets serious about questioning, and then things they look at and they say, well, we should have waited until the last, and then go ahead and deal with the fallout.
So you know, there's
arguments
for both sides,
but you understand
but there is
their
arguments
mentality.
for both sides, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, because a lot of times you want to do all the research beforehand before you can answer questions about different things.
Well, there's researching getting your ducks in a row.
Exactly.
I think you have to go to history and not let history repeat itself when it comes to informing the community. Mm-hmm. And I say this again, I think transparency is always the best.
It's key.
You know, it's always the best tool. It's
Especially
always the best key,
support.
because if you're always open about things, then you can never worry about looking like you were hiding something. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was, you know, in the news this week. The other thing, I know there's always a lot of news happening in the community, and on Straight Talk, sometimes we don't handle news. We have an element of news to the show, but I thought was important that there was another person who was involved with Operation Cancun, which was Carly Goodleaf, who recently had her charges dropped, and I went to speak with her to get more details on that. So we're going to take a quick look at what she had to say about that.
Well, for me personally, the charges were withdrawn on October the 9th, and it took 30 months for that to happen. So from March 2008 till October 2010, I was just waiting for my court date, and it was always postponed. And then I had an opportunity for, I guess you call it a pre-trial, but we waived that because there was no, the lawyer felt that at that time there was no reason to go through 2 days of sitting in court listening to any types of evidence that may or may not have pertained directly to me, so we waived a preliminary hearing. And there was others involved in Operation Cancun. As you know, it was a big case. So as other things were developing with other people, for me, the Crown basically said, well, there's not enough evidence to proceed against Ms. Goodleaf, and we're withdrawing charges. And so the judge said, Madame, you're acquitted. And I said, thank you very much.
What was that like for you?
Well, it was like a big weight lifted off my shoulders. It was kind of like, finally, it just felt like, yay, it's over, that's over, and I can finally move on. Even though I did move on, but still that issue was still there, not gone, you know. Now it's done, and I feel a lot better.
How had that affected your life?
Well, for me, I lost my job. I was suspended indefinitely. I was working for the education center, and so I lost my job, I lost my income, and so my way of earning a living was not there. I did whatever I could to try to feed my family and keep a roof over their heads, and you know, it wasn't good. It was really hard to have people treat me differently, and you know, like I was working hard to try to put whatever I can to feed my kids, and then there was people who would like try to just take the food out of their mouths, you know. It was just really, really hard. But at the same time, there were some people who were very, very supportive, and there's one Mohawk woman who I will never forget. She sent me a text message and she said, may the Creator give you the strength to get through this. I kept thinking about that whenever I felt low. So I appreciate that.